Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. Putting America first, second, and third. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Friday, September 25th, 2015. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. We have oodles and oodles of stuff to talk about today. I'm expecting the denial of service attack to hit my server any second. We're going to be talking about Hillary. We're going to be talking about the Pope. We're going to be talking about all this stuff. The phone lines are open. 877-300-7645. 877-300-7645. Tom is sitting in our control room, as always, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. We're watching the feed here. The Pope is arriving at this school in Harlem. He's got a couple more things to do in New York, and then hopefully, thankfully, he will be out of the United States and away from the possibility of a false flag. So far, so good. Our fingers are crossed. Now, really good news coming on in. Speaker of the House, John Boehner, has abruptly announced that he will resign not only the speakership, but his seat in Congress as of the end of October. Nobody was expecting this, so there's something going on in the back channels we don't know about. We do know that the House was looking at a possible election of a new speaker, and maybe Boehner decided he didn't want to be around to be defeated. But I think all of Boehner's over-the-top support for Israel's agenda to defeat the Iran deal has come back to haunt him. Because Boehner not only failed to do what Netanyahu told him to do, in the process, he displayed for all America the degree to which Israel has subverted the government of the United States of America. We'll be talking about more of that later on. Interesting response to his announcement. A lot of cheering, and not just from liberal Democrats. Conservatives were saying this is a good thing. Some of the GOP candidates were saying this is a good thing. How does a man that hated and reviled get into the speakership to begin with? Are they using the Diebold voting machines over there in the Congress? Now, the other breaking story as we go into the show is the investigation into Hillary's email has found even more work-related emails that were not turned over to the State Department, not turned over to the investigators. And here's where it gets tricky for her, because last August, Hillary testified under oath under penalty of perjury to a federal judge that she had turned over all work-related emails. And there's today's announcement, yesterday's by the FBI, and even the State Department came out today and said, oh, well, we missed these other 900 that weren't turned over to the investigating committee in the Congress. So that situation is just beginning to dissolve around here. Okay, we're going to take a phone call. Ronnie from Nevada, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, thank you. I appreciate you taking my call. Now, this morning, I was on, I'm got a few days off from work. But anyway, this statement from John Boehner blows my mind. He says that my mission every day is to fight for smaller, less costly, more accountable government. For the last 5 years, our majority has advanced conservative reforms that will help our children and their children. And he's proud of this and what he's accomplished. I'm trying to figure out, maybe you can help me out. What has this guy done?
Well, he has sold out to his masters on Wall Street and Tel Aviv, and what he's doing now is he's trying to craft his historical legacy. And every politician stepping down wants to craft their legacy to be something that sounds really, really good, even though the reality is usually quite the opposite.
Right. But my point is, we're supposed to just read that statement, digest it like that's the way it is. Like we're supposed to digest the Common Core educated math garbage that they're trying to teach these kids in school today. Mm-hmm. We're just supposed to say it's okay.
No, we're not supposed to say it's okay. In fact, we have a right under the First Amendment to the Constitution to stand up to John Boehner and say, John, you're full of it, okay? And we don't believe a thing you say any longer.
Right. And and I'll bring up the last point and I'll let you go, and I appreciate your time, but what's funny is you call all these people up, whether it be any congressman or even the speaker and the staff, these people, and I hate to say it, and I'm not trying to be rude, these people are just totally stupid. They won't answer a question. They just say, it's just not my opinion to answer what the congressman thinks. And, you know, why do they work for him if they can't answer a question or give an opinion?
No, you misunderstand. They work for him to protect him from having to answer questions. You know,
right.
Ambiguity is a tool of political campaigning. You don't want to be held to account for anything definitive that you say. Look how long it took for Hillary Clinton to settle down on one side or the other of the Keystone Project. They're always trying to keep their options open, and the staff of a congressman is there to insulate them from the voters and the public and the media, and not allow the congressman or congresswoman or congress critter, let's just do the gender-neutral term, congress critter, to get nailed down to some particular position which can come back to be a problem for them somewhere down the road.
You know, but it seems to me like that if he really truly believes what he wrote on that statement there today, this guy's going to be a nut.
Of course he doesn't believe it. Of course he doesn't believe it. Yeah.
Well, I know. I sure as heck don't believe it, because you got to be stupid to believe something like that, especially if you live outside of Washington, D.C., and you know what's going on.
They're just going through the motions. They're playing the political game by the rules that have worked since the height of the Cold War in the 1950s, and they, for the most part, just don't understand how dramatically our society has been transformed by the availability of the Internet and the independent media. Those old propaganda tricks and tactics do not work any longer, but they don't know any other way to do what they're doing because they've been doing it so long for so many generations, and that's why they're still trying these same old propaganda tricks, and then they're scratching their head saying, gee, this worked back in Nixon's day, why isn't it working now? And they most of them just don't get it yet. They think the Internet is a bunch of tubes.
They absolutely not. Absolutely not. But look, I thank you for your time. I appreciate you. But, you know, that's crazy. Why waste your time? Why waste your breath doing a statement like that? I mean, it's all bought, sold, and controlled. It's follow the money.
That's exactly it. What Boehner has said will be enshrined in the corporate media in order to be passed on to future history propaganda books, okay?
All right. Hey, thanks. Appreciate your time.
All right, you got it. We're going to let you go here. We got two more callers waiting on the line, and before I get to them, though, I want to pick up a couple more stories. There's a very interesting story floating in the Daily Mail that Russia, Syria, and Iran are working together in Baghdad to coordinate Shia militias fighting ISIS, says U.S. intelligence, as Moscow continues to increase its military presence in the region. So now, in addition to going into Syria, to stomp down on what everybody now understands was the U.S.-created ISIS, Russia, Syria, and Iran are doing exactly the same thing in Iraq. And the U.S. has just been blindsided. They're trapped by their own propaganda, and the U.S. can't come out and say, look, we're not doing very well against ISIS and Al-Qaeda, but you can't interfere. Because, again, Syria and Iraq are asking for help from these other countries. Syria and Iraq did not ask for the United States to come in and bomb their countries into rubble. And Putin has played this brilliantly. Now, a story over an Investment Watch blog, Eric Margolis is out there saying the media wants you to hate and fear Russia. And we have been seeing the Russia bashing nonstop. Putin shot down Flight 17. Putin is eating endangered species for lunch. Putin passes gas in the Kremlin elevators. Whatever they can come up with. And to top it off and illustrate the point, the White House has issued a statement claiming that next week's meeting between Obama and Putin proves that Putin is desperate. He's crawling to Obama to try and save himself in Russia, which is absolute nonsense, because the rest of the media around the world is saying the U.S. just blinked in Syria, and it looks like it's going to stumble in Iraq. We'll be back after these commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go ahead and take some of these phone calls here. Steve in Massachusetts. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I got a theory, and I got to throw it out there. I want to know what you think about it. Now that when Germany went to join Russia and Syria, that VW scandal seemed to
Yeah,
happen.
a lot of people noticed that timing where Germany, as well as France, announced they were pulling away from the U.S. anti-Russia coalition and going along with Putin's plan for everybody to get together and just get rid of ISIS and Al-Qaeda for once and for all. And then all of a sudden, a non-governmental organization finds that VW was cheating on its emissions controls, which, as it turns out, they've all been doing it. But we're seeing only the German car companies get targeted. It was first VW, now BMW, and now Mercedes is being accused of violating emission standards, leading to basically a ban on the importation of those cars into the United States of America, which is a major part of their market. But yeah, the timing is just too cute. This is the U.S. throwing a tantrum, because Germany has decided they don't want to go along with this agenda for a new world war against the U.S. and Russia, because it's going to be fought on their soil. They've been through that twice, don't want to be part of it this time, and this is the U.S. punishing them.
Yeah, the reason why I came to that conclusion is when I saw that scandal on TV, they didn't just present the scandal. Right after, they said they interviewed some people, and the people said, "Oh, I'll never buy a VW again."
Yeah.
There's no reason for them to add that second part in the news. It was just them trying to convince other people not to buy VWs.
Yeah, and when they were reporting on these ignition locks on the General Motors cars that were actually killing people, we never saw that interview. "I'll never buy another General Motors car." You're right. It's absolute propaganda. And again, it is starting to come out that everybody was cheating on the emissions tests because the requirements are just ridiculously way too high to combat human-caused global warming, which is a load of bovine excrement to begin with. But the timing of this, they went after Volkswagen, now they're going after BMW and Mercedes. They're hitting those German brands as punishment for refusing to allow World War III to be fought on their soil.
And manufacturing has always been the bread and butter of Germany. You know, you hit them in the manufacturing.
That's what they're really good at. That's why Germany got targeted in World War I, even though the war was actually between Serbia and Austria-Hungary. And the reason for World War II was Nazi Germany freed themselves from private central banking, and as a result, they became this economic powerhouse nobody could compete with that was still enslaved to a private central bank. And that's what led to the global economic boycott of Germany, which set the stage for World War II.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Michael, thanks.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over here to George in Hawaii. Aloha, brah. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Listen, picking up on that guy's comment, it was just 2 years ago that the head of Honda had to come hat in hand to Congress and apologize. So this is not uncommon that they target one or two automotive companies.
No, it isn't. The fact of the matter is American cars cannot compete with these foreign brands. We were talking, I think it was yesterday, where the U.S. government has been concealing the true safety record of American cars, including those General Motors cars with the faulty ignition switches, because they're concerned that the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership is going to mandate uniform safety standards for all signatories, and the U.S. cars can't get there. The U.S. cars cannot meet the European safety standards.
I'm with you, Mike. Now, listen, the reason I'm calling this morning is morning for us, but is I've been around been a Catholic since Alexander the VI, right? It's been a long time.
Party animal. Yes.
Yeah, I've seen the Vatican play Europe just like a deck of cards.
Yes.
Every monarchy's been played by the Vatican. Well, I think the Vatican just played us like a bunch of dopes. They did the thing in Cuba, loosened up the thing with Fidel, softened that whole thing up, weakened the immigration policy, opened the doors, and then he comes to America. And I love the Pope. Don't get me wrong, he's a nice guy, like the Dalai Lama, like all these wonderful holy guys. But he now comes to America and tells us that we need to open our doors to immigrants as he speaks to us in Spanish.
Yes.
Now, after softening up Cuba, it just seems the timing, again, like the German timing, the Japanese timing, the timing is just absolutely ridiculous. And I'm offended. I'm offended by the Vatican and this move because we were set up.
Well, now it's kind of a two-way street, because there is no question that some kind of a deal has been made where they're using the Pope to sell certain agendas to the American people, including increased immigration, human-caused global warming. But the obvious hypocrisies between what the Pope is saying and how the Vatican itself behaves undermine that whole story. And we're going to be talking about the Pope a little bit further in the show. We've got some developing stories on that, okay?
Oh, Mike, real quick, two-way street. I blame our own government for letting this thing happen. We had a very good policy in place. All of a sudden, things have changed. Tremendous change. The guy should have stayed in the Vatican. That's my opinion. Okay, Mike, thanks so much.
Well, you know, I think the Pope has a right to go any place where there are other Catholics around the world, but they did promote him like a rock star. I mean, it's just nonstop TV coverage, and they're using him to sell agendas to people who aren't listening to the bought and paid for scientists any longer. Anyway, George, aloha bra, and we're going to let you go here, and I'm going to get on back to what's going on in Syria, because we are aware that a Russian naval fleet has sailed to the eastern Mediterranean off the coast of Syria, ostensibly for military exercises through the month of October. They are being joined by elements of the Chinese Navy. Now, China is not even saying this is an exercise. China is saying we are going to take part in combating ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and they're deploying some of their Navy ships off the coast of Syria as well. And what it looks like to me is, sometime once all those assets are in place, Putin is going to say, sick 'em, and ISIS and Al-Qaeda are going to get erased from Syria, possibly even Iraq, and the U.S. justification to be in those countries is going to evaporate. Now, apparently, Francois Hollande and Angela Merkel are arguing back and forth regarding Syria and the refugee crisis, and it's looking less and less like humanitarian concern and more about who's going to get the resources from where. It's an opportunity for a cash grab from someplace else. Another story coming on out here. Apparently the BBC has been caught exaggerating the numbers of children in the refugee crowds by a huge margin, and they were called on it by Breitbart. And once again, the BBC is misstating the news for political gain, and we all caught them doing it. We'll be back after these few words. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. And a comment in the What Really Happened chat room. Somebody was saying that the BBC has overstated the number of children in the Syrian refugees 26 minutes before the refugees actually reached Syria. So, all righty. Now then, the migrants trying to get into Europe, and they're not all Syrian. They're coming from every single country the U.S. has been intervening in, and they're tired of it, and they're trying to get out. And some of them are getting very creative, because apparently 12 Nigerians arrived at the Kiev airport claiming to be a soccer team that was scheduled to play in a match in the Transcarpathian region. The airport security got just a little suspicious and found out there was no such game scheduled, and sent these Nigerians back to Nigeria. But they're getting very creative about how to get past the borders here. All righty, so getting on back to what we were talking on the phone call. Germany moves away from the U.S. anti-Putin alliance, joins forces with Russia in the coalition to defeat ISIS. This is how the rest of the world is going to pull the rug out from under the U.S. rush to World War III. They're going to take away the excuse for the U.S. to be in Syria. They're going to take away the excuse for the U.S. to be in Iraq. By destroying ISIS and Al-Qaeda, the U.S. has no more excuses to intervene in anybody else's country. And, of course, our government can't stand up and say, look, we're invading them for economic reasons, and, yeah, we lied about ISIS and Al-Qaeda, but it really was for the best. And, you know, give us your money and your kids because we've got to invade all these other oil countries and to keep the dollar propped up. And, of course, Americans aren't going to go along with wars for that reason. And then, of course, as we noted, as soon as Germany indicated they were moving away from the U.S. agenda to Russia's agenda of actually getting rid of ISIS, this American non-governmental organization just happened to discover that Volkswagen and BMW and Mercedes were cheating on their emissions numbers. The timing is just too cute. Now, Kiev, still trying to stir conflict up, has now banned Russia's Aeroflot and Transaero airlines from flying into Ukraine. They're no longer allowed in Ukrainian airspace or to land at the airports. It's another little sanction. Now, last week we were reporting, or actually earlier this week, we were reporting on the development that Kiev had signed certain agreements with NATO. And the idea was that NATO would have, at least on paper, a justification to come to Kiev's aid if Russia were to invade. But apparently NATO is having different ideas about what's going on. Because earlier in the week we saw NATO basically telling Poroshenko, you might want to calm down. And today, NATO has issued a directive, if you will, to Kiev that they must conform with the Minsk agreement. And so all of a sudden it looks like NATO is having second thoughts about a new world war fought on European soil. And they're trying to tamp down the situation in Kiev. I remember during Vietnam and the protests against that war, there was a very popular saying that was floating around the peace movement. Suppose they threw a war and nobody came. And it's actually happening. Now, out in China, they've just conducted a successful debut launch of their latest ICBM, the Long March 11 carrier. And it is basically the most powerful solid fuel rocket ever manufactured in China. Now, this rocket carried 4 microsatellites. It is a satellite launcher, could be adaptable to military use, and you need to understand this missile was built in part with the technology Clinton allowed China to obtain in exchange for campaign donations back in 1996. Now, over in Catalonia, they're coming up on their elections Sunday to elect the 135 members who will sit in the region's parliament. This is being viewed as a plebiscite on independence because the pro-independence candidates are all expected to win. And if that happens, the next step will be to actually declare independence, and there'll be another war over in Spain. We're hearing that up in Scotland they're getting ready to try once again for an independence referendum, and this time I think they're going to be keeping a much closer eye on those people who are counting those votes. Election fraud only works when it's used to shift a contest a few percentage points one way or the other. When you use election fraud to reverse a popular landslide, everybody knows what you did. Now, President Obama is pulling back on yet another one of his promises. U.S. troops are going to stay in Afghanistan beyond 2016 to basically stop a resurgence of the Taliban. Ooh, bad Taliban, bad Taliban. By the way, Taliban literally means student. Because after the U.S. went in and had the Mujahideen kick out the Soviet Union, the U.S. dropped all support for Afghanistan. It descended into chaos, and finally a government basically of the college students emerged themselves. And that's what they call themselves. We're the students. We're going to sort of run the place. But we're going to ban opium, and we're going to charge fair market price for our oil and our oil pipeline rights of way, which is what led to the U.S. invasion. And so what's going on over here is the people of Afghanistan are just as sick and tired of their U.S. puppet ruler as every other country conquered by the American empire. And they're trying to give their puppet rulers the pink slip. And so once again, the U.S. government is going to be sending your sons and your daughters in uniform back to Afghanistan to enforce the will of Imperial Washington, D.C. It's another conquered province that just refuses to stay conquered. What's wrong with these people that they won't just accept their new status as slave state? Now, up in Ontario, there's a new Democratic Party candidate that has come under serious condemnation by Jewish community leaders, because apparently this candidate has never really heard of Auschwitz. And they're making a big stink. You cannot elect somebody who does not know the whole story of Auschwitz. Now, would anyone care to try to explain why a knowledge of something that supposedly happened in Germany on the other side of the planet before we were all born has any relevance at all to what is going on in Canada today, other than as a prelude for the inevitable Israeli begging for special privileges and money? I mean, that's how absurd it really is. This idea that it's mandated. And it's not just Canada. Back in 1994, the Florida legislature passed the Holocaust Education Bill, which mandated Holocaust education in Florida schools. They're spending money to teach kids about something that supposedly happened on the other side of the planet long before they were ever born. And they don't really have a lot of resources for that kind of stuff. Now, this is a reminder of the extent to which Israel has subverted the U.S. government at all levels. Now, I'm kind of old-fashioned about public education. I think our children should be learning skills for our economic future. How to solve problems, how to design products, how to build things, how to make things, how to grow things. Not be propagandized about stuff that happened long ago, if it did happen, somewhere else on the other side of the planet because a foreign government says it must be so. We'll be right back. Hello, America. Welcome back to the show.
Sing a song of
and we're talking about how deeply Israeli subversion has penetrated our entire governmental structure at all levels. Mandatory Holocaust training in our public schools. How's anybody going to get a job with that? It's completely useless to us. Very useful to Israel because the foundation of all their constant begging for money and weapons. Oh, we can't have another Holocaust. We're not even sure we had one to begin with. Now, the San Jose Mercury News is reporting Berkeley Commissioner Cheryl Davila authored a resolution calling for the city of Berkeley to divest in Israeli investments because of what happened in Gaza in 2014 and promptly got removed from her position. Now, we're already seeing over in Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen, Libya, all these countries, they don't like living under puppet rulers. They really don't. Why should it be any more acceptable to the American people? Now, boycotts are a recognized form of nonviolent protest. It is protected under the First Amendment right to freedom of speech. That Israel is so greedy for our money. They're going on out there launching these campaigns to subvert the First Amendment on our college campuses and to just punish anybody who dares to suggest that maybe not quite so much of our money should go to Israel as has been happening. Because Israel likes to take that money, bring it back to the United States, and do things that are not necessarily good for the United States, like constantly bribe our elected officials and buy up our best companies and move them to Israel. And that is harming our economy. When the best companies, like Intel, are all of a sudden doing more of their manufacturing and production in Israel than they are in the United States of America. Now, a lot of people are talking about the stock market, the Federal Reserve, the recent decision to not raise the rates because, frankly, they can't. And Janet Yellen gave this speech the other day, which apparently afterwards she had a fainting spell, which may indicate the stress that she's under. But distilled down, her basic speech said our current policies can lead to financial instability, but we're going to have to maintain it anyway. Because they are trapped. They can't raise rates without crashing the stock market, which means that every single Wall Street firm that has been part of this plunge protection team and buying up huge blocks of stock to keep the market up would be instantly insolvent. So they're stuck. We're in the era of hyperinflation. They're trying to hide it from you. They're trying to hide it from the international economic industry, because this hyperinflation is a very good reason for other countries to stop using the U.S. dollar for global trade and banking and switch to other more stable currencies. You can see the corner that they're in. Now, there's another article that came out of The Guardian. We're getting a lot more accurate reporting about what's going on in the United States from media that is outside the United States. And the headline reads, "Disaster capitalism is a permanent state of life for too many Americans." And it's talking about how even people who are working are not able to make it. And they start with the story that we reported yesterday, where there are people in New York City who are working full-time jobs and still have to live in the homeless shelters. And in San Francisco, bus drivers have been sleeping in their cars because rents have gone through the roof. The system is unstable. It is becoming more unstable, more lopsided every single second that passes. Now, as you know, we're coming up on the end of the U.S. government's fiscal year, and we're starting to see all these horror stories coming out about how the food stamps are going to stop and the warning messages are sent out. Over in California, 1 million federal workers have been warned that they may have to stop working in a possible government shutdown. Now, this is scaremongering by the federal government. All these dire warnings are an attempt to scare government workers and food stamp recipients into calling Congress and demanding they pass a budget no matter what riders are attached to the bill. We don't care if there's an authorization for war. We don't care if there's an authorization to take our children away and have the state raise them, which we're seeing more and more. Remember, Michelle Obama's school lunch program had its ideological roots in Hillary Clinton's It Takes a Village, which is when they signaled this idea that parents should not be allowed to raise their own children. The government will do it for them. And here is Common Core and mandatory vaccines to go along with it. By the way, those mandatory vaccines, they are a violation of the Nuremberg Code regarding informed consent for all medical treatment. Everybody in California who passed that mandatory vaccine bill should be hauled to The Hague and brought up on war crimes charges. Now, getting on back to the economy, story coming out of ATR.org. Taxpayers are fleeing Democrat-run states for Republican ones for a very simple reason. The taxes are lower when the GOP is running things, because the GOP tends not to listen to those folks who say, I want lots of free stuff. And apparently the White House's answer to that is to load up the Democratic states with illegal immigrants and refugees, let them all vote, even though they're not citizens, and they'll still have an electoral majority with which to hang on to Congress, they hope. Now, speaking of Congress and the White House, getting on to politics, Trump is still the GOP frontrunner, despite all the obvious overt attacks on him. And he has a 10% lead over Carly Fiorina, who is reported as coming on strong, but there's a qualifier on that. Donald Trump is sticking to his message. The media is focusing on his faux pas and his temper, but he's sticking to his message. Seal the border and deport all the illegal immigrants, and he's getting a lot of resonance. Now, here's a story that came out of Godfather Politics. 3 new polls out. Has Donald Trump plateaued? Yes, he's still way in the lead, but, you know, he's not soaring upward as rapidly as he was before. Well, there's not much left for him to go. The closer you get to the top of the poll numbers, the less room there is for you to grow into. But you need to take a careful look at who is being polled. Because when you get into the actual poll numbers, you find out they're not polling across the entire political spectrum in the United States. They're cherry-picking certain demographics to generate the numbers they want to serve the GOP corporate agenda, which is to get Trump out. Now, we ran our own poll. Who is your favorite GOP candidate? We listed them in alphabetic order. And we even included none of the above, which briefly was actually winning earlier today. And the numbers that we have here, of course, have Donald Trump way out in the lead. If you subtract out the none of the above, he's at like 80% of all the people who came on in there. And Jeb Bush got no votes at all. Carson got 14 votes. Chris Christie 3 votes. Ted Cruz 6 votes. Carly Fiorina only got 3. She's being promoted as the answer to Hillary Clinton, and unfortunately she's turning out to be much closer to Hillary Clinton than I think people are comfortable with. Mike Huckabee 0 votes. John Kasich 3 votes. Rand Paul got 37. So they may be singing the death knell for his campaign a little prematurely. Marco Rubio 1 vote. Donald Trump 369 votes. That's where we are. Now the good news we're getting out of New Hampshire, my home state, I'm a Granite Stater, Hillary Clinton is now trailing Bernie Sanders in New Hampshire, even without Joe Biden in the race. This is according to a new CNN WMUR poll. Hillary's in trouble, and it only goes downhill from here. And when we come back from our top of the hour news break that we're about to hit, there's been new developments in the email server case, and Hillary is in serious trouble. Good. We'll be right back after the news and our top of the hour commercial break. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. And the corporate media is continuing its Pope-a-thon. Apparently the Pope is now on his way from the school in Harlem to this huge gathering way out in the open in Central Park, New York, where he's going to do a presentation. And we're already hearing these little mutterings on the media about how they're not sure if security was good enough, they didn't have enough metal detectors, and again, I'm concerned about the possibility of something happening to the Pope framed on a Muslim to reignite the war fever. So, now, on to Hillary Clinton's email server scandal. It's getting worse because they have found on Hillary Clinton's private emails, work-related emails that she did not turn over. Now, Hillary's claim up to this point is she only deleted personal emails and turned over all the work-related emails. She swore under oath, under penalty of perjury, to a federal judge last August, and now she's looking at a perjury charge. Now, Hillary's defenders are out there saying, oh, she just overlooked them. Really? But, a couple of weeks ago we were talking about how there were these gigantic gaps in the work-related emails, months long. Nobody is going to believe the Secretary of State conducted no official business for periods of time up to and exceeding a month at a time. Now, as I mentioned, the Department of State has notified the Benghazi Committee in Congress that they found another almost 1,000 mails that hadn't been turned over before. Now, the head of the National Security Agency, who was testifying on this matter, basically said that, yeah, Hillary Clinton's private, unsecured, unencrypted email server would have been a high priority target for foreign spy agencies. There's no question. Now, he's stating the obvious, and we've been stating it for quite some time, but now it's basically Admiral Mike Rogers testifying before the Senate hearing about the server was saying, yeah, there is no question all of the classified information on her server, U.S. secrets, United Nations secrets, secrets of foreign governments, was very much at risk to be hacked by foreign governments. Even the best possible interpretation, she was being incredibly reckless. Now, there's an article over in Kyle Wingfield blog, AJC.com, a triple body blow to Hillary's excuses about her emails. And basically is talking about the revelations, contradictions, are starting to gang up on Hillary. She's not just having to deal with one revelation at a time. They're coming 2 and 3. And it's obvious she's lied. There's no question. Hillary supporters can't say, oh, no, she didn't lie. There's no evidence. There's not a shred of evidence anywhere around. It's a vast right-wing conspiracy. They're thrashing around. They really are. Now, yesterday we were talking about the Hillary campaign's concern that their presumed support among women, what Hillary's campaign termed the vagina vote, is evaporating rapidly. A lot of women are supporting Donald Trump because in this era of gender ambiguous, politically correct, foppish candidates, Donald Trump's aura of being a strong alpha male is very attractive to a lot of women. But there's another article coming out of here at townhall.com. Women are running from Hillary's campaign. They think she's lied about the email server. They think that she did something wrong and she's covering it up. Now, Hillary and her people are still trying to handle this crisis like it's a legal case before a judge. What can be proven, how can they evade, the loopholes, technicalities, weasel wording, all of the usual games that we see. But remember, we're talking about an election, and politics is perception. And the perception of Hillary is she did something wrong. She did many things wrong. She's been covering it up. It's been a problem throughout her entire life, going all the way back to when she was fired from the the Watergate Committee for unethical behavior. Now, with the revelation that the FBI is now recovering deleted emails from Hillary's server, including deleted work emails that were not turned over, Hillary's campaign has changed their story, saying that claims the server were wiped were just a rumor. They were never true. We never said that. It was just a rumor that was put out there. So, anyway. Now then, story that came out earlier from CNN, 23% of women report sexual assault in college. Study finds, oh, it's horrible, those poor college girls, they're just such horrible victims. You read a little further into the article, and you find out how they got that number, 23%, is they included kissing as a form of sex assault. You come up to a girl, and you're saying hi, and there's a hug, and you give her a peck on the cheek, that is counted as a sexual assault. Now, if you are my age, and you have my deepest sympathies if you are, you will recognize this as a replay of the 1990s male bash militant feminism, which was designed to unite women voters behind any candidate promising to protect them from us evil males that no politically correct woman should stand next to without a hazmat suit. And guess who was in the White House during that period of time? And back then, they were inflating the numbers to create this fictional crisis, using very loose definitions of sexual assault, including, at one point, holding hands. That trying to hold hands with a woman represented a form of sexual assault. Women who agreed to have sex with a man but had regrets the next morning were told, yeah, you were raped. If you felt bad about it afterwards, yeah, you were raped. Time magazine quoted Catherine Comans, the assistant dean of student activity at Vassar, as saying a false rape accusation was a good experience for a man to go through. And those days, if you had a really colorful story about how you were gang raped by skateboarders in Davis, California, it was a path to stardom on all the daytime talk shows, Donahue and Oprah. Grist for the mill. Now, anybody who's really interested in just how out of control it got back then should hunt down a book called Who Stole Feminism by Christine Hobbs Sommers. Now, she herself was an equity feminist, and she saw what was then a positive social movement hijacked by the militant gender feminists for political and financial gain. And I recommend the book very, very highly. So all of a sudden, here we are, 2015, and the liberals are screaming that women on campus are poor, helpless victims for male lust. At the same time, they're insisting women are the equal of men in military combat, which shows you just how disjointed the propaganda has gotten. Well, Hillary needs to get the women flocking back to her. Hillary needs the women to stop supporting Donald Trump or anybody else and flock back to Hillary. And that's why she was out there the other day saying, you know, victims of sexual assault have a right to be heard and believed, unless, of course, they're the trailer trash sluts that are accusing my husband of having molested and groped and fondled them. So it's the same tactic, just with a new coat of paint, but new paint cannot hide old rot. And I think this is already starting to implode because of the obvious hypocrisy. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're watching on the corporate media. The Pope has begun his motorcade around Central Park. It is a huge crowd and huge security force around the Pope himself, which is a good thing here. Now then, getting on back to Hillary Clinton. There is a second scandal beginning to engulf her regarding Huma Abedin. And part of the scandal is that Huma Abedin had a special arrangement that allowed her to collect a full-time salary from the State Department, as well as collecting a salary from a private New York firm with ties to the Clinton family, as well as doing some work directly for the Clinton Foundation. Now, the reason this is becoming a major problem is when this story first broke, Hillary Clinton was asked about how Huma Abedin got this very special arrangement, because the normal rules are when you are working full-time for the government, you are not allowed to have a second job or to moonlight. Now, back on September 4th, Hillary was being interviewed by NBC's Andrea Mitchell. And Huma Abedin was still working for the Clinton Foundation at that time. And Clinton said, quote, well, you know, I was not directly involved in that, but everything she did was approved under the rules as they existed by the State Department, end quote. Well, it turns out Hillary Clinton signed that deal memo that gave Huma the exemption from the rules. So she was directly involved in it. We've got her in a new line. By the way, Hillary Clinton owes me a new egg timer, because this one is worn out. And it gets even worse than that, because apparently Huma Abedin failed to fully disclose her husband's business dealings as part of the required financial disclosures to get this special employment deal. Now, Huma Abedin's husband, you probably remember him, Anthony Weiner, former member of Congress, got kicked out for sending pictures of his wiener to people on his cell phone. And so it just gets worse and worse and worse. All right, we're going to grab ourselves a phone call here. John in Barbados, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael, yes. Considering the latest revelations about GCHQ and its much wider scale, even than the NSA, of collecting emails and people's history of which sites they visit, I would suggest that the FBI just ask GCHQ to send them a copy of all of Hillary's emails. I'm sure Hillary would have been a big target for MI6.
Well, that's what the head of the NSA is saying.
Yeah, so I think we really should look outside of America for the information. I think it'll be available on many a state national security computer.
Well, at this point, the actual content of the emails is no longer important in terms of the coming election. Like I said before, politics is perception, and the perception is Hillary was doing something. We don't know what exactly, we suspect, and she's lying to cover it up. And that's not something we need to have in the White House. The only specific emails I'm concerned with that I would like to find are ones which confirm that Hillary was actually selling secrets off of her server to foreign governments and being paid through the Clinton Foundation? Because more and more people are starting to ask that question, and it demands an answer. And the longer the U.S. government goes without addressing that very real possibility, the more complicit they themselves look.
Well, I think this could very well tie into the whole administration, right up to the gentleman who occupies the White House, and it's looking more dire for both. I mean, there are stories that Mr. Obama won't complete his second term, and this could be the disruption of his presidency. This whole scandal at Benghazi and various other. I mean, we know the information is out there. All the FBI need to do is collate it and get it together.
Well, the FBI's job is to protect the elites, and we may be looking at a limited hangout where they're just going to drop everything on Hillary and let her flame out in order to save Obama. Because in addition to the possibility that Hillary was selling U.S. secrets, United Nations secrets, foreign government secrets off of her server, there's the other parallel issue that the U.S. State Department was smuggling weapons from Libya to ISIS and al-Qaeda in Syria through the consulate in Benghazi. Now, if Hillary did that all on her own, she is guilty of treason, giving aid and comfort to the enemy in time of war. I don't think she would have done that on her own, and I think that is why Obama is getting ready to basically just drop this all on Hillary, because if the American people find out that our government is spending our money to give guns to ISIS and al-Qaeda at the same time they're telling us ISIS and al-Qaeda are the enemy, then the whole fraud of the war on terror implodes.
Well, the way I see it, Michael, I'm sure that GCHQ, in the case that you've just described, have enough information on Obama to blackmail him in various ways.
Maybe, but I don't think they're as interested in protecting Obama right now as in trying to preserve the illusion that the U.S. federal government still retains some semblance of legitimacy. Because we're looking at scandals of a scale where everybody is tied in with it. And we're beginning to see it isn't just a few bad apples. This is the nature of people who are attracted to the federal government. They're all like this. They're all corrupt. They're all selling out.
Well, it's not just America. I mean, the scandals now that are snapping at Cameron's heels, the Prime Minister of Britain, you know, his bombing of Syria without authorization. And I mean, that would be a serious war crime without even national authorization. Never mind, you know, the international law side of it.
Yeah, even if Parliament had gone along with it, there's no reason for Great Britain to be bombing Syria. Syria hasn't done anything to Great Britain. It's just Great Britain going along with the U.S. agenda to conquer all these oil-rich regions in order to profit from them. The same reason that Great Britain participated in the 1953 CIA overthrow of Mohammad Mossadegh over in Iran, because it was British oil companies as well as American who got the favorable pricing deals under the Shah.
Absolutely. But it looks like the coalition, in fact, it looks like there's an infighting going on even in NATO.
It's beginning to fragment. Germany and France just demonstrated that. John, I'm sorry, I have to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. We got another caller waiting on the line, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to grab a real quick phone call here. Mike in Illinois. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I just had a quick question. Earlier, you said that you saw someone in a comment in a chat room. Mm-hmm. I was under the understanding you disabled the chat room. Is there an alternative one that's been created?
They both existed. I had to disable the chat room in the BAM user feed because all these people from Israel were signing on saying, "Oh, you're a Jew hater, you're an anti-Semite, you want Hitler to come back and gas the Jewish babies in the ovens." But there is and always has been a members-only chat room at the WhatReallyHappened.com website. And there's a lot of very cool, educated, enlightened, intelligent people in there right now.
Yeah, because I missed all the old guys, and that's what I was wondering. So, how do you become a member?
Well, I'll tell you what.
Sign up?
Basically, you make a donation, you send me a preferred username and a password, and I sign you up as a member. And you promise to follow all the rules and be polite, and that will be that. And if you want any more details, just shoot me an email, okay?
Okay, great. Thanks a lot.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over here to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Mike, I found something very disturbing. I've heard rumors that this is happening, and I just didn't want to believe it. Just like I don't want to believe dancing Israelis at the World Trade, at the 9/11. But, I like to be realistic, and I looked it up on the internet that Israel was supporting ISIS fighters. So, and sure enough, right on the Jerusalem Post on the internet, I found it. They're admitting it. They're treating Al Qaeda. Well, they're saying Al Qaeda and Al Nusra fighters, and they said because they're better than the Shiites, something like that. I mean, this is disgrace, and it makes me also believe the United States is involved in this too, and that's probably a lot to do with what happened in Libya too. And that's why I wonder whether a lot of this stuff isn't going to try to be swept under the rug, because I think more people than just Mrs. Slick Willie were involved, including Republicans, like that guy Mike Rogers on that committee there.
Well, John McCain, we got pictures of him with the ISIS leadership. The independent media and the Internet have taken the rug away, and what they're doing now is when they get caught in one of these deceptions, where Israel, there's actually photos and videos of the IDF giving weapons to ISIS. They change their story and say, well, yeah, we're needing to support him because, and it's no big deal, and it's just the way it is, and try and act like it's just, not worthy of consideration. And of course, the corporate media will pretend like it's not a big deal, and look the other way. But for anybody who's following along, they're seeing very clearly that we were sold into these wars, the third invasion of Iraq, and going into Syria on this idea that there's this evil force out there called ISIS, and then we find out that the U.S. is giving weapons and supplies to ISIS. They trained the top ISIS commander in Syria, and they were paying him. It's been documented as late as 2013. The U.S. government was giving this guy money, supplies, and weapons. And
well, just like Tim Osman.
I'm sorry?
Just like Tim Osman, who was actually
yes.
with the CIA. Osama bin Laden.
Osama bin Laden. And his older brother was business partners with George W. Bush in a company called Arbusto Energy. And the bin Laden family is very much into construction. They still get a lot of U.S. government contracts in the Middle East.
Do you think that Putin, when he goes to the UN this week, that he might, let the cat out of the bag and let people know? Because I'm sure he's privy to this. I'm sure he's probably got some of those emails that Mr. Slick Willie had as it is. And
no, Putin avoids the dramatic gesture, which is a wise thing to do for any statesman who's trying to calm things down. He's not going to say or do anything which would either provoke an emotional response, which is unpredictable, or open himself up to being attacked by the U.S. government. Oh, Putin actually thinks somebody else did 9/11 than bin Laden. I mean, well, look what happened to that guy out at up in Canada, who just tweeted, about all the Israelis who didn't show up for work at the World Trade Towers on 9/11. He gets canned immediately. Putin is a chess player. He's going to move slowly, deliberately, and carefully, and I'm expecting him to say some very solid things about we all need to pull together and get rid of ISIS and Al-Qaeda because, as the U.S. says, ISIS and Al-Qaeda are the bad guys. Let's all unite together against them. And the U.S. can't get up and say, look, ISIS and Al-Qaeda really work for us, so back off already. And so Putin isn't going to do anything to undermine or dilute that message.
What do you think is going on with the Israelis? I mean, the dancing Israelis, I thought that was a bunch of nonsense. And then I looked it up, and evidently they were arrested, and evidently they had explosives on them, and they were let go after a couple of months. The news media reported on it because I checked it out on YouTube, and then it just disappeared. I mean, what's going on with that country?
Well, remember the motto of Israel's Mossad: by way of deception thou shalt conquer. This is what, look at Israel on a map. Look at Israel on a map. They're half the size of New Jersey. Okay? They exert power and influence over other countries through bribery, blackmail. Sometimes I think the reason for American politicians to go over to Israel before they launch their campaign is so Israel can make a video of them having sex with farm animals or something, so that Israel knows they're dependable and controllable, and they will never dare stand up to what Israel wants. But, Israel is a master of these kinds of underhanded tactics. And they have infiltrated and subverted our government down to the level of the public schools. And I think it's time for Americans to get outraged.
There's another thing, too. Like, I think our RT showed that they were discriminating against fellow Jews there in Israel, against the Palestinian Jews.
It's amazing. When I was still married to my first wife, who was Ashkenazi, and after all this brouhaha we see in film and TV about how the Jews are persecuted and, the human rights and everything, and then, being exposed to the fact that the Ashkenazi are some of the most racist people, even against other types of Jews, and I think that comes out of a subconscious understanding that the Ashkenazi are not actually descended from the biblical Hebrews. They're descended from Khazars who converted to Judaism 800 AD. And so their claim to the Holy Land is phony anyway, and they're very hostile to other types of Jews like the Sephardic, who actually do have a genetic trace back to the biblical Hebrews.
Yeah. You're a Sephardic Jew, right? I think you said that before.
On my father's line, but I mean, there's so many other things that are in there as well. There's some French, English, the Sephardic, there's some Portuguese, there's a trace of Chinese, and according to family legend, there's a little bit of Huron.
What's that?
Indian, Native American.
Oh, Indian. Oh, okay.
The Hurons, yeah. So I'm your basic Heinz 57, I'm a mutt, okay? I'm a mutt. I'm a little bit of everything. One of these days I'm going to save up and get that Ancestry.com DNA test and, see if there are any surprises in there. It'd be kind of hard to be a surprise. There's a little bit of everything in there already.
Yeah, because I'm telling you, I just don't understand. But another thing about what do you call it, the Khazars or the Khazars?
The Khazars, yeah, Khazaria.
That was, hey, wouldn't the Ashkenazi Jews look more Oriental? Or Asian?
No. Well, Central Asian. I mean, look at the lily white skin they have. Do they look like they're actually from the Middle East? No, they don't.
A lot of them don't, no.
Yeah.
A lot don't. You see a lot that do.
They're the whitest non-white people on the planet.
That's true, too. So, but the Khazars, wouldn't the Khazars been Asian stuff? Wouldn't they look more like Asiatic?
Yeah, but there's been a lot of, breeding, inbreeding, crossbreeding ever since then. But there have been DNA tests. I mean, the studies have been done, and, that's what the real history is, but of course Israel's politics is based on this mythology of David and Solomon and Moses and all this other stuff, and it never stands up to the scrutiny of actual hard science. We got to take a break for commercials. Mark, sorry, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and let's get on back to Hillary Clinton, because the server scandal has been growing for a very long time. The corruption has been documented for a long time, and we're going to take a look back at some of the earlier things that came out in light of what we know now, what Hillary has been up to. So over at the Wall Street Journal, earlier this year, they were reporting foreign government gifts to the Clinton Foundation on the rise. Now, when the Clintons set up the foundation and Hillary became Secretary of State, everybody was saying, whoa, conflict of interest here. And the Clinton Foundation said, oh no, we have a self-imposed ban on foreign money, which evaporated immediately. And the Wall Street Journal called them on it. That huge amounts of money were flowing in from foreign governments to the Clinton Foundation while Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State. Those foreign donors who were identified as receiving favorable treatment from the State Department, permission to buy U.S. weapons they previously had not been allowed to acquire, U.S. government grants, funding, all kinds of things, to the point where Larry Klayman filed a RICO lawsuit against the Clinton Foundation. And he had a strong case. The case was thrown out of court by the judge who was appointed by Bill Clinton and refused to recuse himself over what is an obvious conflict of interest. Another flashback, Newt Gingrich. Clinton foreign donations clearly violate the Constitution. And interestingly enough, in this article, which originally appeared in PolitiFact, they're quoting George Stephanopoulos in an interview with Schweizer on ABC this week, saying, you know, there's nothing, there's no smoking gun. But you need to understand now, looking back, we understand George Stephanopoulos is neck deep in this Clinton email scandal. So of course he's going to try and protect her, to protect himself. Another flashback story from the Washington Times. Hillary Clinton under fire for foreign donations and link to Russia uranium deal. Now, this deal helped Russia nearly corner the world uranium market, and they got State Department approval to do it, following a very generous charitable donation to the Clinton Charitable Foundation. And then, of course, a biggie, this was reported on CBS no less, that the Clinton charity was not disclosing foreign donors. Now, early on, it was simply they weren't being listed. Later on, the Clintons set up this subsidiary charity office in Sweden. And huge amounts of foreign money went into that, which was then bundled up and transferred to the Clinton Foundation in a single lump under the identity of the subsidiary in Sweden. The original source for that money is unknown. Now, here's where it gets interesting, where all that past stuff is coming back. Apparently, the FBI last weekend arrested Ng Lap Seng. And the FBI arrested him working with federal prosecutors assigned to the Public Corruption Squad in the Southern District of New York. Now, this is significant because Ng Lap Seng is a prominent Chinese millionaire, and he was one of the sources of Chinese money being funneled into Bill Clinton's re-election campaign back in 1996. And so what I would hope is that Mr. Seng will offer a deal to the FBI and the Public Corruption Squad, saying, I will turn state's evidence on what Bill Clinton was doing during the Chinagate scandal if you'll cut me a little slack today. I hope he does that. And then I hope he starts wearing his Kevlar underwear, because people who stand up to the Clintons have a bad habit of very, very short lifespans. Which brings me to a story that came out of hotair.com and actually originated in Politico. Apparently, the Hillary Clinton campaign are trying to send subtle messages to Vice President Joe Biden. Please don't run or you'll get hurt. And it was picked up, and a lot of people are out there saying, boy, this sounds suspiciously close to a real threat. The hurt seems to extend beyond possible political risks. So, Joe Biden, if you are listening to my voice right now, no long walks in Fort Marcy Park, and please stay out of small aircraft. Trust me on this one. Remember what happened to John F. Kennedy Jr. when he decided he was going to run for the Senate seat that Hillary Clinton wanted. Just trust me on this one, Joe. Trust me on this one. All right, we're going to grab ourselves a phone call here. Peter in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Michael, I just have been driving around. I just heard that Boehner resigned.
Yes. The party starts in 15 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, I can remember hearing 6 to 8 weeks ago rumblings about the Republican Party's and their donors' dissatisfaction that Boehner's handling of the P5+1, Netanyahu to speak in front of Congress, polarizing and, you know, making it, you know, the Israel lobby basically identifying it pretty much now with the Republican Party only.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And I had heard that 8 weeks ago, and now the guy is gone.
Well, here's the interesting thing. The House was going to have another election for Speaker of the House, and it was very clear Boehner was not going to win. And you're absolutely right. Boehner blew it. He was under orders from AIPAC and Netanyahu to kill the P5+1 deal. He failed to do that, and in the process put Israel's subversion of the U.S. Congress on full display for the American people to see. And that is probably a big reason why he's being gotten rid of. There may be something else going on in the background. There's a report out that he made some kind of a deal with Nancy Pelosi to make sure that certain of Obama's agenda are going to continue to be supported.
Well, I don't know a lot about McCarthy, but I do know that he is an A number one apologist and apex shill. I do know that.
Yeah, we need to get rid of all of these Israel firsters. John Boehner going is a good start, but there's a lot further to go. We need politicians in Congress who are putting America first, who are out there proclaiming what great friends they are of America, who are concerned about what happens to America. All these people in the government who are just such great friends of Israel and so worried about Israel, kindly move there.
Michael, what have you heard about this?
About which part?
About the Boehner thing.
Just that he's stepping down end of August, that he may be leaving to avoid the embarrassment of being voted out of the speakership. But there's absolutely no question that Israel's wrath is being felt by everybody who failed to accomplish Netanyahu's goal. I mean, Netanyahu bet his political reputation. AIPAC bet their credibility on proving once and for all they're in charge of the U.S. Congress, and they fell flat on their face the same way the British Israel lobby fell flat on their face trying to keep Jeremy Corbyn out of the leadership of the Labour Party. And so the whole world is seeing what Israel has been up to in these countries. They're seeing Israel start to fail. They're feeling the iron grip of Israel's talons around the throat of their government starting to slip away, and it's encouraging people to stand up and say, yeah, enough of this nonsense. America needs leaders who are going to put America first, second, and third, and favors for a foreign government have to go way down on the bottom of the list after keeping the street gutters clean.
Well, that's I think that's spot on, man. But anyways, good riddance to bad rubbish. Don't let the door hit him on the way out,
Well, I'd rather the door hit him on the way out. I mean, just to sort of put a punctuation to the thing, bye, John, whack. And then we get to watch him bounce down the steps of the Capitol building. Boink, 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 boink.
Michael, between this one, Boehner, and Corbyn, and remember Cantor a year ago.
Yes.
These are historic. This is historic.
Yes.
Really.
The times, they are a-changing. Okay?
Wow. All right, thanks, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot, Peter. We're going to let you go. We're coming up on our top of the news hour and commercial break. When we come on back, we're going to be getting back onto this question. Did Hillary Clinton sell U.S., UN, foreign government secrets in exchange for campaign donations? It is a legitimate question. It must be asked, and the longer the U.S. government refuses to ask it, the more complicit they seem. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. And we need to ask the question. Was Hillary Clinton, while Secretary of State, selling U.S., United Nations, and foreign governments' classified information in exchange for donations to the charitable foundation? And all of Hillary's defenders are going to stand up and say, oh, she would never do anything like that. And they can't say it because the Clintons did it once before back in 1996. President Bill Clinton cleared very sensitive technology to be sold to China over the objections of the Department of Defense, various intelligence agencies, and started getting huge donations into his re-election campaign fund. First of all, from the companies that were selling the technology to China, and from all of these Chinese citizens, and ultimately it came out, the money they were putting into Bill Clinton's re-election campaign came from foreign sources. It was laundered through a citizen to make it legal, because under U.S. law, candidates for office may not accept donations from foreign sources. You have to have a U.S. citizen to act as the conduit, or a lobbying group like AIPAC that will bring Israel's money in and then say, oh, it's a donation from an American political group to the candidates. That's how it gets done. And so there is a past record of the Clintons treating U.S. secrets as if it's their own personal property that they can just sell in exchange for donations. They've done it before. That is an established fact. And so it is legitimate, with all the other issues that have been going on between the email server and the Clinton Foundation and the obvious favors to big donors, we have to ask if this private email server, outside government control and monitoring, worse security than Ashley Madison, unencrypted, at least one known wide open subdomain, was the delivery system for secrets to foreign governments with donations to the charitable foundation, how the money was paid and laundered. It is a legitimate question. It must be asked. And the longer the U.S. government refuses to ask that question, the more complicit they look. It's like that other caller was saying, when they arrested those Israelis for dancing and cheering as the World Trade Towers came down, 3 of them were later identified as Mossad agents. And the U.S. government just bundled them all off back to Israel. When Carl Cameron did his 4-part series on the Israeli spy ring on Fox News, he quoted a U.S. government official as saying there was evidence that linked the arrested Israelis to 9/11, but it was classified by the United States government. Now, the story is getting out. People are starting to ask. I was very honored and flattered to find out that David Icke ran my article, Hillary the Spy, on his website. And we need to get this question before the eyes of all the voters. Even if the government won't look at it, even if the corporate media won't report it, the American voters need to know this is a possibility. So feel free to copy it off and send it around, whatever you want to do. All right, let's grab a couple of phone calls here. Apostle in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Best to you and Claire. But I was always wondering, why did they never ask, or why have they never asked Donald Trump if he would get rid of lobbyists in Washington?
I think that would be a fair question. And I think the lobbying industry needs to be reformed to be more transparent to the public. But the big fix for lobbying that I want to see happen is the way the laws are currently set up. If you are a lobbyist talking to a politician, you are required by law to identify yourself as a lobbyist before you talk to the politician. But there's a part of the lobbying industry called grassroots lobbying, and the law says that lobbyists do not need to identify themselves if they're talking to ordinary citizens. If they're sending in people to infiltrate public hearings or public meetings, these lobbyists can go on in and pretend to be just plain folks to try and steer the discussion the way the lobbying group wants to go. That, to me, is very dishonest. And if I were put in charge of reforming laws regarding lobbyists, I would definitely say grassroots lobbyists in the real world and even online are required by law to identify themselves as lobbyists, the company they are lobbying, working for, and the client they are currently lobbying on behalf of. I would like to see that.
Do you think that Trump will get rid of the lobbyists in D.C. if he's elected president?
I don't think he'll get rid of them, but I think Donald Trump might be open to the idea of making some changes. I don't know that for a fact. He really hasn't touched on the issue. But I think Trump understands that his soaring popularity is based on an American people tired of business as usual. And in order to basically, show the American people that he's not going to do business as usual, lobbying laws would be a good thing for him to start changing, and it really wouldn't cost all that much in terms of political capital or harm to the economy.
Okay, I'm just curious on that because I'm surprised nobody ever tossed that question at him.
I think it's because the issue of lobbying in general has a very negative connotation for Americans as a whole. And there really isn't any point of difference between Donald Trump and the other candidates. They're all constantly being lobbied by people. I think the reason we're seeing the establishment opposed to Donald Trump so much is he's got so much of his own money, he doesn't need to listen to the lobbyists. And I think if anybody ever actually asked him about it, that would probably be his answer. I don't need to listen to the lobbyists. I've got my own money.
Yeah, I was told, or I heard a story that if you went into Washington, D.C., there was lobbyists out front of everybody's doorstep, except for Ron Paul's.
Yeah, Ron Paul was very much, not sympathetic to the lobbying pressure. I've heard some absurd number, like there are, 20 or 30 lobbyists for every one member of the actual government in Washington, D.C. It's a huge business.
Yeah, it's disgraceful, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is, because we don't have lobbyists for the ordinary people out. Well, I take that back. There are some public interest groups. They're just not well funded because they're not supporting some corporation's interests. Anyway, I need to let you go. I want to try and fit in one more phone call before the commercial break. Philip in Virginia, aloha, what's on your mind?
Hey, aloha, Mike. Just a question about the situation with Hillary and Hillary, her email. This seems like a tremendous bonehead move on her part. Why would she do such a thing?
Well, for the money, for the power. She gets ahead by cheating. The Clintons have done that their entire lives. That's what works for them.
Well, we know that, but I'm saying, why would she make such a bonehead move of putting the email server or doing a private thing instead of just going through, the normal, I guess, bureaucratic.
Well, see, that's exactly the question. She obviously wanted this server outside government control and monitoring. That's the only real. She claimed it was for her convenience, so she could use just one electronic device, and then she was photographed with her government BlackBerry, an iPhone, an iPad, a mini iPad. So she was lying about that. She wanted this server operating outside government control.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That demonstrates willful intent.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What you're saying. Yeah. Okay. Yep. That makes sense.
Okay, we got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the phone call, and we'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show, and I have been corrected by somebody in my email saying that Donald Trump has commented on lobbying, describing it as, quote, it's a broken system, it must be fixed, end quote. So Trump is apparently on the record regarding his disdain for lobbying. Let's grab ourselves a real quick phone call. Steve in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, hello, Michael. It's kind of funny whenever you say the scandal gets worse with Hillary. That means good to us, So it's kind of a double speak. It's like
you see me frowning over here. I'm having a good time. After 21 years here, I'm feeling, okay, a little bit of evening out of things here.
Right. I think the one gentleman that called in and said that, people wouldn't wake up to 9/11. They won't do it. Maybe they'll wake up to this, but, they can't bring the whole thing down because obviously, Obama had to know about all this stuff and, whatever.
I don't think Obama would have known about Hillary selling secrets. I think Obama did know that Hillary was running guns from Libya to Syria. I think that was administration policy. But I don't think, anybody knew about the spy. Obviously, spies keep what they're doing very, very secret. And we didn't even know there was a private email server until the congressional investigation into Benghazi noticed that they didn't have any official emails from Hillary in what was sent to them from the State Department's email server. And that's when this whole private server thing surfaced. It's kind of like how Richard Nixon's White House taping machine, nobody knew about that until it was mentioned in passing as part of the Watergate investigation. And that's when things really began to unravel, and I think future history books looking back at this are going to say the revelation of the email server was the beginning of the end for Hillary Rodham Clinton.
Well, I really do think it's the end for her. Now, as far as Trump goes, I was going to call to say, well, you know, he brought up the immigrant thing, which is on everybody's mind. Everybody agrees with him. Look at the numbers. That's just one topic, Mike. That's just one little topic. Now, I think he has other aces up his sleeve, or trump cards, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah, trump cards.
All he has to do, all he's got to do is start to mention the lobbyists, the health care, he just has so much to unleash yet.
Well, he does, but he does need to be careful because, again, he's a good businessman, but with regard to hardball politics in Washington, D.C., he is a bit of a babe in the woods, and I think in many ways he's as naive going into this arena as Jimmy Carter was. I'm very alarmed that the corporate media and his opponents are trying to bait him forward on this Obama birth certificate issue, and he needs to understand he's walking into a trap because in order
I didn't know he was doing that. No.
Yeah, in order to derail Trump, they may just come out and say the reason for the second birth certificate is that Barack Obama's biological father is not Barack Obama Sr., it's Frank Marshall Davis, and it was a personal family tragedy, and we don't want to talk about it, and that bad Trump digging up all these horrible memories and defaming the memory of the president's mother, blah, 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 blah. He needs to stay away from that issue, and he needs a political advisor who's going to tell him what's really been going on in this country, or he will be led into a big old bear trap.
Right. Yeah, he is very susceptible to that. Now, I just want to get your opinion on this. Do you think that, I don't know quite how to word it, but is Donald Trump, how bad of a money junkie is he? Does he have his problem under control, do you think? I don't think Donald Trump is as much a money junkie as an adrenaline junkie. He's in it for the game and the thrill rather than the wealth. And he's been very wealthy, and he's also been bankrupt a couple of times, but he keeps on coming back. I think he's more hooked on the action, as it were. Running for the White House is a big adrenaline rush. So I don't see him as, in all of his business dealings, he's had his ups and downs. He has not really been accused of a lot of underhanded activity like we see so much on Wall Street. So I think he's more into the certainly his ego and the vanity and being out there, and Trump is plastered on everything. I think that drives him more than simply the money itself. And I'm not entirely sure that that's unhealthy. Right. I don't either. I think it's wonderful because, some of this information is getting out there to people. Just because of him.
Yeah, well, no, I think you've got it backward. The fact that he had such a positive response shows us that Americans are already aware of these issues. That's why they're responding to him. He didn't convince them immigration was a problem. He simply said what they all knew and nobody else would talk about. The immigration is a problem. And if he keeps following that formula, he's going to be unstoppable unless they do the Robert Kennedy approach.
Well, like I say, he has trump cards up and down his sleeves. All he's got to do is what everybody's thinking, or suspects, whatever, and just blurt out about the lobbyists. It's got to go. Attack the Congress. Two sides of the same coin. Everybody knows that. This Congress.
He's going to have to be careful because part of the art of rabble-rousing is understanding what the rabble is ready to listen to and what the rabble is not yet ready to listen to. And if you can master that, then I think he's going to do very well. But he does need some better political advice about what has really been going on, so that he can avoid the traps that are being laid for him even now. Anyway, listen, Steve, I got to let you go. We're running out of time, and I got a bunch of stuff I got to cover before the end of the show. Now then, Carly Fiorina, as you know, she is out there with this myth of secretary to CEO and how she's just plain folks and she worked her way up, and a huge success story. The Washington Post went on out and looked at her actual life history and found out, to nobody's surprise, Carly Fiorina comes from a very wealthy, politically connected family. She had lots and lots of special advantages growing up that ordinary people do not get. And as a result, the Washington Post granted Carly Fiorina 3 Pinocchios regarding her story of secretary to CEO. Yes, she was a secretary once, and yes, she was a CEO. She was very good as a secretary, not too good as a CEO, but there's a lot of stuff omitted that would change public perception, and the Washington Post was fact-checking it. More about Carly Fiorina after we come back from these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking about Carly Fiorina, which I'm sure Hillary supporters are happy for. Now, there's an interesting story coming out of the Daily Beast, and it talks about Carly Fiorina's tenure as CEO of Hewlett-Packard. Now, Hewlett-Packard, when I was much younger, back with NASA, that was the top tech company. Everything they made was sturdy, reliable, it worked, no problems. You never had this constant, update, patch, fix, version 2.6, the golden cut. It worked out of the box, and it worked for a very, very long time. My Hewlett-Packard 28C calculator lasted, I think, I'm guessing here, it was that long ago that I got it, but we're looking at 24, 25 years. And I will grant you the 50G I just got hold of is working great, although the new Hewlett-Packard printer I got from my wife, I have to whack it on the side every once in a while to get it to work. And ultimately, of course, Carly Fiorina was fired from her job as CEO of Hewlett-Packard after shaving something like $60 million off of the worth of the company. Now, this story out of the Daily Beast is reporting that Carly Fiorina, when she was CEO, oversaw Hewlett-Packard's lobbying of the U.S. government for a temporary tax holiday on corporate profits, promising the U.S. government they were going to use the money that they weren't paying in taxes to create new jobs. And the U.S. government went along with that to the tune of about $4 billion. Hewlett-Packard used that money to buy back their own stock, and Carly Fiorina fired 14,500 employees during that same period. This is the difference between Carly the illusion and Carly the reality. So you want to keep that in mind. Now, over at the Daily Mail, they're running a story, The Stench of Death Around Rand Paul's Campaign Warn Republican Insiders. And they're saying that Rand could be the next person to quit the presidential race because his fortunes are not turning around. He's very, very low in the polls. And apparently he is running out of money. And once you are out of money, you are out of the race. Now, you want to know how bad corruption is in this country? This next story is going to tell you. As you know, we had that Citizens United decision that says corporations, which are these buildings of brick and stone and steel and glass, are legal persons. At the same time, we're being told that unborn babies are just a blob of protoplasm, if you can try and reconcile those two. But granted the idea of constitutional rights applying to corporate interests. So, over in Kentucky, State Senator John Schickel has filed a lawsuit saying that laws that ban corporations from bribing politicians violate those corporations' First Amendment right to freedom of speech. That's how absurd the corruption in this country has become. Now then, the Pope is giving his little speech there. He's on TV and talking about whatever he's talking about. And, of course, the Pope has been lecturing the UN on the evils of greed and the rest of it. Do you know the Catholic Church collects $1.6 billion in U.S. contracts and grants since 2012? They're getting huge amounts of money from the U.S. government. And by the way, if you've never seen the Pope's crib, it's a little bit bigger than the White House. And the Pope is in charge of the Vatican Bank and the second financial network that began to surface when Pope Benny the Rat was in there, and yet he's out here telling us about the evils of greed. Little bit of an hypocrisy there, I think. Now, Pope Francis has condemned marijuana, which is kind of weird because in the Bible it says God gave us every seed-bearing plant upon the face of the earth to use. Interesting. And by the way, haven't you ever wondered why Jesus had so much trouble waking up the boys on the Mount of Olives with the Roman soldiers coming for them? Now, the reality is that Judea in that time in history was a major transit route for all kinds of drugs, opium from Turkey going down to Egypt and so forth. Now, Jeb Bush has come on out saying the Pope shouldn't discuss climate change because he's not a scientist, and as much as it shocks me, I'm in agreement with Jeb Bush. The Pope isn't a scientist, and the Vatican's history with scientists, not very good. Took them 400 years to apologize for how they mistreated Galileo. Still don't want to talk about Giordano Bruno. But again, what the Vatican is saying and what they're doing are two completely different things, because we're hearing that the Vatican has no plans whatsoever to divest their investments from fossil fuels. Now, if you've been watching the Pope-a-thon, you probably saw this supposedly spontaneous encounter where this little girl runs up to the Pope and gives him a T-shirt and a hug around the neck about let my family stay in this country. They're illegal immigrants. And we even had a caller in yesterday saying, I don't believe this little girl could get through security like that. And it turns out, yeah, it was a staged incident. This is being reported out of the Toronto Sun, where there is a coalition of illegal immigrant organizations that got together and said, we're going to stage this. When they heard the Pope was coming, they started planning, and they literally were following the Pope around with this little girl who was already scripted and rehearsed, looking for an opportunity where they could pull this off. And if they hadn't succeeded in Washington, D.C., they were already prepared to go to New York and Philadelphia to try it again. And apparently, let's see, major planner of this was Juan Jose Gutierrez of the Full Rights for Immigrants Coalition. And they even admitted it to the Associated Press. Yeah, we did it. And again, getting back to the issue of hypocrisy, the Pope is lecturing us on immigration and opening our borders, but Vatican City has the strictest immigration policy on earth. It's almost impossible to be allowed in to be a citizen of the Vatican, which is its own nation state. And of course, they've got really big walls around the Vatican to keep out illegals. I've been there. I've seen the place. Huge walls. But the Pope wants us to tear the walls down and just let everybody come on in. Again, the double standard and hypocrisy undermines his message. Now then, I have reprised to the front page of WhatReallyHappened.com my article on debunking the Saudis did 9/11 nonsense, because apparently Twitter is being flooded with claims that someone has leaked the missing 28 pages from the 9/11 report that puts the blame for 9/11 squarely on Saudi Arabia. And they've been trying to sell this lemon for years now to take the focus off of Israel. And I wrote this article debunking the Saudis did 9/11 to simply point out, again, look for what should be there and isn't. And what isn't there is a motive for Saudi Arabia to do something like this. They have much to lose and nothing to gain from 9/11. And if Saudi Arabia really wanted to hurt the United States, they don't need to crash airplanes into buildings. All they got to do is ask for all the money back they've invested in the U.S. economy, and the U.S. economy would crumble. But the perpetrators of 9/11 are still out there trying to frame somebody else for it. Remember, first it was Afghanistan did 9/11. No, not them. We bombed the place. Let's go to Iraq. They did it. Then Iran. Now Saudi Arabia. The whole world did 9/11. We have to conquer the planet. Mahi dictum est. All right, we're coming up here on a commercial break. We'll be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, last segment of our program today. And as you know, the definition of terror has become very slippery. Once they got us past the idea of, well, if you're a terror suspect, it's okay to suspend your civil rights and torture you until you confess to shooting down the Hindenburg, or whatever it is they want you to confess to. And it's gotten a little bit absurd. Here in the United States of America, you are, and this is according to the FBI, considered a terror suspect if you talk about the Constitution, if you listen to independent media. But taking the cake for absurdity has to go to the government of Australia, which issued a 32-page booklet on Monday that includes environmentalism and listening to alternative music as signs of terrorism. So according to the Australian government, if you do not confine your listening to the top 40, you may be a terrorist. I can't imagine the Australian people greeting that with anything other than laughter. Now then, a little bit of good news for those of you who are sons and daughters of the South. The Confederate flag is returning to the Georgia license plates. This whole ban the flag because somebody somewhere is offended by it nonsense seems to have faded, gone the way of the dodo bird. And Georgia is once again reasserting its own historical heritage. And they're putting the license plates out there for the sons of Confederate veterans. And maybe it's the beginning of a trend where we're going to stop telling everybody in the country you can't do something because this one person over there in Poughkeepsie is offended by it. And all of our college campuses ought to do exactly the same thing. We have a right to talk about what's going on in Israel and Palestine, and I don't care who it offends. Because you cannot have freedom of speech and not offending people together. It doesn't work. This idea of offense-free dialogue is just another form of censorship. Now, a little bit of good news. There's been a court ruling handed down saying that forcing people to reveal their cell phone, tablet passwords is in fact a violation of the Fifth Amendment, protection against self-incrimination. They can't do it. If you have security on your devices, they can't force the password. Of course, with all the NSA backdoors, it probably doesn't make a lot of difference anyway, unless you write your own encryption, in which case the same thing would apply to the encryption key. Forcing you to turn over the encryption key so that they can unlock the recipe for your Aunt Mary's top secret chocolate chip cookie is a violation of the Fifth Amendment. Even more interesting, the NSA director has admitted that forcing people to share encryption keys with the government does leave us vulnerable to the bad guys. Our IT structure isn't more secure because of all of this NSA government nonsense. It's weaker. But the government doesn't care if you're being ripped off. They don't care. They just want to make sure that they know whether or not you're thinking those double plus ungood thoughts about the government. And that's all they care about. We reported yesterday only 1 out of every 100 online crimes is ever even investigated. No wonder it's exploding all over the place. The cyber criminals know it's a 1 in 100 shot they're even going to be investigated, and if they're any good, they're never going to be found. The NSA can't find them. The NSA needs some good press. If they could have found the cyber criminals, they would have put them on display saying, see, we serve a useful purpose. Haven't been able to do it. Alrighty, getting on back to Volkswagen, story over in the Independent, basically acknowledging that, yeah, pretty much all car manufacturers have been finding ways to get around all of these vehicle emissions requirements, which are basically a little extreme. They're decided by politics, not by science. And a lot of people are coming out here and saying that Volkswagen did wrong, BMW did wrong, Mercedes did wrong, but the ultimate villain is all of this caterwauling about human-caused global warming and carbon dioxide. And if it hadn't been for that monumental fraud, we wouldn't have seen these unrealistic emissions goals followed by people trying to cheat the system. Because car makers know that car purchasers want performance, not economy. Volkswagen was trying to keep everybody happy, and they got caught at it. But the ultimate villain is this fraud of human-caused global warming, which has cost industry billions of dollars, cost taxpayers millions, if not billions of dollars, all to deal with something that doesn't actually exist. Carbon dioxide is not a pollutant. It is an essential component of life on Earth. And yes, carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has increased slightly, and with it, plants are growing faster, taller, producing more food. Some of the African deserts are starting to regreen. This is all good stuff. Remember, the medieval and Roman warming periods were times of incredible productivity. You didn't need to go out and work. Food was just growing everywhere. And as a result, people had time left over to get into little things like art, science, architecture, culture, engineering. And these warming periods coincide with the times of great cultural flowering in the human race. Now, carbon dioxide has been increasing in the atmosphere, and we have been hit by record-setting winter after record-setting winter after record-setting winter. We're going into another one. Because NASA has finally admitted carbon dioxide in the atmosphere does not increase the temperature of the atmosphere. In point of fact, it acts as a coolant because it absorbs infrared from the sun and then radiates it back out into space. The dominant control over climate on Earth is solar output, which is in decline and heading for a low. We're going into a new Maunder minimum. And with it, we'll get a new little ice age. And I look forward to the day when we're going to see Al Gore totally encased in ice, still out there saying, global warming must be stopped. Global warming must be stopped. Now, over at Fox News, and yet another reason to stop paying any attention to them, as you know, Martin Shkreli, who was the guy who acquired the rights to this AIDS drug and immediately raised it from $13.50 to $750 a tablet, was described as just being a savvy businessman by Fox News host Eric Bolling. Now, Martin has already announced the price of the pill is not going to be $750, but it did create enough of a stir to give Hillary Clinton an issue that she could try and distract the voters from the email scandal with. She was out there just yesterday saying she has a plan to control the price of pharmaceutical drugs. And she's playing more and more to empty rooms. Okay. Now then, if you deal with the CVS pharmacy chain, they are being sued by the federal government. Apparently, if you have insurance, CVS jacks up the prices for your prescription drugs. It's not one price for everybody, insurance or otherwise. If you've got insurance, they charge you more, and they're being sued for that. Now, out in California, there's growing opposition to this mandatory vaccine bill. They've got it for the children. They're talking about making it for the adults. But everybody needs to remember, forcing people to take medication they don't want is a violation of the Nuremberg codes. There must be informed medical consent for all treatment. If I don't consent to have you stick that needle in my arm and you go ahead and do it, that is a crime against humanity. All right. Oh, there's the music. Okay, well, it's time for me to get on out of here. I got some errands I got to take care of, some other little things to do here. Please have a really good weekend. Please make a point of taking the Hillary the Spy story and copying it to all your social media, post it on all the blogs. This is a question that must be asked, and the longer the U.S. government refuses to ask it, the more complicit they look. We'll be back on Monday. Aloha, America.